Welcome to Umbrella ND's groundbreaking Health Equity Panel Series for neurodivergent adults. We're bringing together diverse voices to tackle the most pressing health equity issues facing neurodivergent communities today. At Umbrella ND, we believe that true wellness goes far beyond doctor visits and prescriptions. It's about creating fair opportunities for everyone to live full, thriving lives. Our panel series explores how a person's wellness is intrinsically connected to the social, economic, and environmental factors of their life. Throughout this series, we're moving beyond one-size-fits-all approaches toward solutions that recognize and celebrate the unique experiences and needs of all neurodivergent people from diverse cultures, genders, spiritualities, religions, generations, and sexual orientations. This vital work is made possible by supporters like you. If you believe in health equity for neurodivergent communities, please consider making a donation to Umbrella ND. Every contribution helps us continue these essential conversations and build the resources our community needs.
Hi, my name is Dr. LaToya Hinton, and I am the coordinator of our well, sorry about that. I had a little bit of sound interference there. My name is Dr. LaToya Hinton. I am the coordinator of these health equity panels that we have been hosting for the last few months. We're here on the fourth panel, which is called A Deep Dive into Culturally Affirming Community Care Models for Neurodivergent Adults. And I'm super excited to host and moderate another one of these amazing health equity panels where we focus on intersectional perspectives and experiences from the neurodivergent community. So I'm super excited to get started with our three panelists that we have scheduled for today. So I would like to introduce everyone to our three panels that we have today. Panelists, what I will do is I will say your name, and then you can do, just like a really quick introduction. And I will start with Dr. David Hester.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dave, just another dude. Glad to be here just to talk to everyone. A quick intro for me. I'm an executive at Life Guides. I'm the CEO of Musing You, which is an organization creating access to equitable health tech. I'm a clinician, a neuropsychologist, and a bunch of other ists is what I normally say. I'm also a father, and just to describe my background and myself, I'm wearing oval-shaped glasses, a dark black shirt. My hair is kind of what some has called a perfectly coiffed lock connection right over my prefrontal cortex on the top of my head. I am also backed by a large library filled with manga, comics, neuroscience books, and culturally affirming care health workbooks. So that's a little bit about me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Hester. And then I would like to introduce Janelle Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you're at in the world. I'm Janelle Johnson, licensed marriage and family therapist, and a whole lot of other things. My primary role today here is as a researcher, so I'll start with that part. I'm a doctoral candidate at North Carolina State University and a graduate research and teaching assistant. And I'm in dissertation phase, so you'll get to hear a little bit about that in a bit. I am the founder and clinical director of Bridges Family Life Center. It is a family therapy and consulting practice outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we primarily serve Black and Brown families that are managing mental health and neurodivergence challenges. And then I do consulting. So speaking and consulting at various organizations, helping folks to improve their work culture and increase diversity and equity, primarily focused on helping people understand neurodiversity, disability, and mental wellness, and making sure that they're doing that in a trauma-informed manner. So that's a little bit about me and my work. Glad to be here.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you. And then I will introduce Dr. Mel Hauser.
Hey everyone, Mel, she, they. I'm the founder and executive director of All Brains Belong Vermont. We're a nonprofit community health organization in Montpelier, Vermont, that offers healthcare and community programs and helping people arrive at a deep understanding of their access needs. Our medical practice is informed and driven by our patient community. It's really a co-created community health village, healthcare for neurodivergent people by neurodivergent people. Honored to be here and with you all and with my fellow panelists.
Awesome. We're so happy to have everyone here. And we want to go ahead and get started with our panel. So the first question that we actually have today is, what does culturally affirming community care mean for you personally? And what we'll do is we'll kind of go in the same order that we introduce the panelists. So I'll start with Dr. David Hester, and then we'll go to Janelle Johnson, and then we'll go to Dr. Mel Hauser. And we'll just kind of keep going in that same direction. Also, if you have something burning that you want to add into a conversation, don't feel like you have to wait for the next question to chime in there and add something in. These are very organic conversations, and so we're used to that. And just be as respectful as possible. To make sure you have a space to hop in there. But I just wanted to kind of add that in just so that as we go around asking these questions, that if you have follow-ups and things like that, you're welcome to add them in. So I will start with Dr. Dave Hester. What does culturally affirming community care mean for you personally?
So I'll start with a quick story. Personally, I'm where I am because of my community. I'm neurodivergent. I started high school in what was called kind of the resource room. I wasn't able to change classes. Everyone else did. I stayed in one class the entire time. And I wanted something different. I wanted to experience the normal, quote unquote, high school experience. And I was told that wasn't going to be an option for me. Even going to college was really not in the cards for me, based on the cognitive delays I had, stuttering, and other disabilities. But the care that I received from not only the medical community, but sometimes the school, was rooted in a deep-seated colonialist kind of racist ideologies and practices that kind of kept me in a box. But what helped was when I connected with the community that wanted to see me grow, that helped me grow. And one of the chief reasons I am where I am now is because of that cultural language that my community was able to kind of lift up for me, my way of being. Sometimes my hip hop style or whatever, my ability to see complex pieces and articulate them. And some would say, hey, it's kind of unusual how you do that. So what it means to me is it means creating space where people feel like they are safe, they're heard, meaning like I feel comfortable sharing what I'm actually experiencing. But it also means that I don't have to mask I'm also a father of a neurodivergent student who's now in college. Super proud of him. And what I've learned throughout my life and through his life is that the support of family and community needs to be in working together, especially if you're in special education or you need support. You have to find your tribe, your community. It doesn't mean that you're not open to the greater community, but having that level of support means that you get your needs met. It means that people are there for you when you need them. It means that you don't have to mask. So fast forward, from my high school years, I'm a clinician, I'm an entrepreneur, and that's all brought me to where I am because I've been the product of culturally informed care. And shout out to one of my former coaches and co-collaborators, Phil Carr, CEO of Good Intentions Counseling. He kind of really showed me what culturally informed care looks like. So that's what I think it's about. It's about decreasing bias and the proliferation of exclusionary systems.
Yeah, I want to know more, obviously about, because you're in these non-clinical and clinical spaces. So it's so cool to hear you allude to both in your own personal experience. And so, yeah, I'm just excited to hear more about that. Dr. Hester, thank you so much for your take. And then I'd like to move on to Janelle and let her give her personal take as well on what culturally affirming community care means.
Wow, I love this question because of the last part personally. So David, thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciated hearing that take. That's what makes these ideals and concepts stick to people and help them carry it forward to form their own meanings. So for me, culturally affirming community, I think to be honest, the first time that I had a culturally affirming community for myself was just over the past couple of years. And I say that because I'm highlighting intersectionality in this piece. So for most folks that are both neurodivergent or disabled and negatively racialized, Black or brown, they are showing up in a space as only a part of themselves. So if they are in a special education space or they're in a neurodiversity space or a disability space, when we show up there, we're one of the only Black or brown people in the room. And it's mostly our white peers. And you get support for your disabled side or your neurodivergent side, but not so much your Black or brown or your ethnicity, right? And then vice versa, when you are in your space that is predominantly Black or brown folks, you are not necessarily getting supported as a neurodivergent human. So it was when I met my advisor, my current advisor, Dr. Jamie Pearson at NC State. She is one of the foremost researchers in understanding Black autistic families in special education. And so that was her lab. The FACES lab is the first place that I experienced culturally affirming community where I could be fully Black and I could be fully neurodivergent and I could be fully disabled all at the same time and present and show up and present myself as I was, with no masking, with a lot less code switching, all in the same space, and be fully accepted, and not just accepted, but celebrated for that. So I think that part is really important too, is highlighting that intersectional piece. Another place that I had that recently was there was a Black disability summit ramped up The first Black Disability Summit, it was online. It happened maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And that was another place where I, again, for maybe the first or second time in my life, experienced that. So culturally affirming community to me is really honing in on making a space where all parts of ourselves can show up and be supported and cared for and celebrated.
I love that. Yeah. That whole self and authenticity, really being able to live that in a way that doesn't feel like a performance, and you mentioned that a couple times, that a space where you don't have to mask, and yeah, super liberating. And I love to hear that crossover between several different experiences. So I will go ahead and move to Dr. Mel Hauser. What does culturally affirming community care mean for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'd say is that culturally affirming care means that you don't have to translate yourself or argue for yourself to be taken seriously. You don't need to justify your needs or defend your way of being in the world, and that you're not asked to. You just get to have value by being a person in the world. And it's really about building a community system where people are believed, where lived experience is honored as expertise, where care, in my world, healthcare is co-created with the people it's meant for, not things that are done to people or for people. It's really about believing that everyone deserves access to healthcare and to community connection, no matter how their brain works or how any other aspect of their identity shows up. So it's about listening, honoring each person's lived experience, and the community designing its own solutions. And I think that healing happens in community, that when you're seen and valued by other people, that's where healing begins. And I think that the last thing I'd say is that, a lot of times healthcare is thought of as an individual experience. You go to the doctor and you have this. Anyway, I think culturally affirming care is shaped by community. It's about creating spaces where people feel safe to show up as their full selves. Mm-hmm. And care isn't just something that happens in an exam room. It's really embedded in how we relate to and interact and support one another. And I think that, personally, I've had to unlearn a lot of what I was taught in medical school, because I was trained in systems that harm people. And even when the intentions were good, I was trained to gaslight people into doubting their own experience. And so culturally affirming care also, I think, means choosing to feel that discomfort and let it change you.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that you had mentioned was healthcare should be with people. And I remember when there's just a total parallel with this in education, because education was brought up several times with Dr. Hester and Janelle Johnson earlier. But this was one of the things that I was taught to do culturally affirming education, was that when you show up in a space and you are an outsider, you're not, part of the cultural community, you are doing everything with the people that have their, children in school or are learning out in the community, kind of everything is done on this equal playing field where everyone has the ability to contribute. And it's something that resonates with me when I think about how amazing that would be in healthcare. And so it's just great to see that kind of crossover, that the power dynamic, if it weren't so uneven and unequal, and people really had the sense to be able to advocate for themselves and the type of care that they're looking for, we wouldn't have this kind of gaslighting that a lot of folks from marginalized communities feel. And so it's just so amazing and kind of like refreshing to hear that, reiterated, that happens in educational spaces, whether that is, special ed, or whether, we're talking about, a one-on-one encounter with, a therapist for, the first time, or, in a group therapy session, or, just, in your primary care doctor's office, right? Like, it should be this dialogue where folks are like working together to heal. And so, yeah, it's just so great to hear that as the foundation and, clear understanding of what culturally affirming care really is. But of course, this is coming from neurodivergent people, right? Who, have experienced that gaslighting, have experienced the sort of pushback, and what that does ultimately to your well-being, right? When people, don't believe you, or, want to disempower you when it comes to your self-advocacy for your health. And so, yeah, this is a super powerful way to start this conversation. I'm just, super happy to hear more. And it's just a super dynamic way to ensure that we are hearing from everyone. Don't mind me, I'm just moving around a little bit.
All good. We're going for the journey.
Yeah, I'm just grabbing a quick charger over here. But I am excited to move on to the next question. And I'll go back to Dr. David Hester for this one. In your experience, why is culturally affirming care a health equity topic? Because this is a health equity series.
Yeah. So before I go into why it's a health equity topic, I want to go back to Mel and just acknowledge what you said about that you've been trained, sometimes to gaslight people. I want to acknowledge and say thank you for saying that. There are so many people that I've worked with, family members, that have felt gaslit by the medical community, by different structures that are supposed to support them. And I'm a geek at heart and a nerd and all that good stuff. And I live by the words of Yoda. You have to unlearn what you have learned at times to grow. And so when it comes to my experience, culturally affirming community care is all about equity and not equality. I think sometimes we have to make sure to talk about the difference. Equality is like, yeah, you can all go there. But equity means like it's giving you the tools so that you can get the access or support that you need. And interestingly, the academic journals support the notion that if your organization or your medical community or your overall cultural community is engaged in validating people's cultural values, their beliefs, validating their practices as individuals, that it significantly improves their health outcomes. It reduces their disparities. And specifically I'm going to talk about men, even specifically Black men. They don't go to the doctor. Why? They're, for years of mistreatment and disbelief. But when people feel like their culture is being appreciated or at least acknowledged and allowed, people will follow the treatments. They'll follow the interactions of the professionals. It'll just overall be more effective. And when you're culturally competent, but then you're also, building these spaces, you're creating opportunities for people to reduce their healthcare avoidance. Meaning like, I'm not going to go to the doctor because they're not going to listen to me. Instead, no, I'm going to, because I know that they're going to see me where I am. And providers and organizations that demonstrate that that cultural competence, they foster that trust, that community, that minimizes discrimination. And real quick story about when I learned how important it was. I had a client who was of Asian, an Asian immigrant family, and they cook, and their way of showing appreciation and love for that is cooking, and then you got to eat it. Now I know some people may have dietary restrictions. I didn't, but at the same time, I indulged, I engaged, and they told me that they appreciated that I, ate the food and asked what it was instead of just saying no, I don't eat that, or no, we don't need to eat right now. We're supposed to be doing our cultural, or not cultural, but our clinical practices. So it is an equity topic because everyone needs access, but then they also need to be met where they are.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's really the difference, right? We talk about, you mentioned that earlier, equality versus equity, and like equity meeting folks where they're at in their health journey, right? And so if it's someone's first time to therapy, right? And you talked about like Black men, like we have to be really honest about this, that I speak from like an experience with my dad and my brother, and they said to me very recently, within the last couple of years since the pandemic, like I'll give 2020 as the stay-at-home order as kind of a reference point. It was kind of the first time in our family where we really started talking about the importance of seeking therapy, right? And we had gone through lots of tragedies in our family. Like my mom passed away from brain cancer when I was 25, and I think even then it really didn't come up. It was like kind of like, yeah, you're talking with the chaplain, and it was a little bit more like kind of on the religious side, and I don't want to stereotype or make overgeneralizations, right? Because this was just my family's experience, right? But at the same time, just this idea of breaking down the stigma and kind of being able to talk about why it's important to seek mental health care in a preventative sense and not just in an intervention, right? Like that is new to a lot of cultural communities. And I think it has a lot to do with, maybe the kinds of, differences in beliefs that people have kind of grown up with from an early age, and kind of how you cope with stress and anxiety and things like that, and when you actually need an intervention. And some of us just don't really have the language to kind of talk about those sorts of things, and so I want to just kind of like reiterate that health access has a lot to do with whether within individual families you have kind of the language to be able to talk about why you should seek help early for different experiences. And I think I would also say that you might just be at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what is causing you to have persistent issues with mental health. And I think like, especially for me, since I'm late realized neurodivergent, anxiety and depression were really like just the tip of the iceberg to kind of understand, all of these other things that were actually going on, ADHD, autism, and then even just, issues with, dyscalculia and dyspraxia and some of these other things that, I weren't really even on my radar, right? But I think, regular communication with other neurodivergent people who have similar experiences with my cultural background, like made me realize that I was just at the tip of the iceberg and that there was a lot more going on and I just hadn't been screened as a child. And so for me, like to I think that's where the health equity topic comes in is just like access, right? Like access to screening, access to the language to be able to talk about what it is that you're going through. A lot of us folks that are marginalized in society just don't have access to that information. And when we do get access to it, it tends to be a lot later than folks who are not, folks of color. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there and say that it's okay to continue to talk about that, because that is a huge part of this being a health equity topic. So I don't know if Janelle, if you have something in specific that you wanted to add to that in terms of culturally affirming community care being a health equity topic.
Sure. I like what Mel was just saying in the comments. When we don't feel safe, we don't have access. I was going to talk about safety. At the end of the day, if we don't talk about history and we don't talk about power, we don't talk about colonialization, we don't talk about all your isms, then we can't really address health equity. It's not possible because there's so much that goes into reasons why people are pursuing access to healthcare, their beliefs. A lot of what I work on in family therapy is helping people to challenge their internalized ableism or their internalized whatever the issue is around what messages they've received about seeking healthcare, seeking therapy, what it means to quote unquote label myself or my child. And all of those things are important to explore, but explore it from the correct place of understanding people's cultural backgrounds as well. And so we know that for Black Americans, for instance, there is this very contentious relationship with healthcare, rightfully so. And the research points from slavery and things like drapetomania all the way to, you're talking about a recent issue with a university in Texas in 2015 that was taking Black and brown homeless bodies and freezing them and selling them to medical universities, right? So we're not talking about stuff that is like some way off, like, oh, that happened 400 years ago. No, this stuff is still happening and it's being documented. It happens less frequently. It's less of a problem, but these things are still happening. And so we need to be considerate of the history and the challenges that different cultures are experiencing because of their ethnicity, because of their language, because of their queerness, because of their race, because of their neurodivergence, whatever the thing is, that is impacting the way that they can interact with health and with healthcare and with healthcare providers, with government that makes policy about their health and their healthcare. And so I think there's no way to separate the two. This is what public health is all about. Public health is all about studying these differences and disparities related to different things, including race. So there is no way to separate them. And if we hope to if we hope to be able to connect with people who are less likely to pursue health services, then it's important to kind of like think outside the box and think through these other larger issues.
I love that because, you're getting at like, how do you create a safe, sustainable system where folks do feel validated and feel honored and accepted and valued, and just kind of all of the things that you need as a human, like to create a trusting relationship, right? Like those are kind of all of the things that have to come in order to ensure that folks of various cultures will continue to come back and feel like there is a dialogue established with medical professionals, right?
And I also forgot to mention this. The other important piece is that, and this is the kind of the crux of my work, and from what I've gathered, the crux of all of our work, to be honest, is that communities have come up with their own ways to care for themselves in the absence of being able to connect with folks that primarily operate from a medical model or from a colonial perspective. And so there's lots of genius there. There's lots of expertise there. There's lots to honor there. And it's not less than. It's not less than what is available when you go to a university doctor or you go to, somewhere else. It's not necessarily less than. It's just different. Both of them have value. And so that's the other important piece of why culturally affirming care matters, that the things that our cultures have created on our own, and if you're talking about all the way from American Indian or Native American societies, or First Nation folks, and their way of care, their way of healthcare, all the way to disability culture and care webs, and like there's all of this great all these great resources, all this great knowledge that for some cultures we're losing some of it, to be honest. And it's really valuable. We need to be able to hold on to that too, and make those connections as well. So not devaluing what is already natural or available to a culture to provide care before government got involved, and long after they decide to pull out and leave and pull back resources. Like that we are capable of doing things for each other and with each other too, and not just dependent on these other entities. I think that's really important for me as a bridge builder. I really value that.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. I wanted to talk about this a little bit more in our previous panel last month that was focused on culturally affirming care specifically for BIPOC neurodivergent adults. And I had mentioned towards the end, because I was a speaker rather than moderator, and so I had mentioned towards the end that reclaiming indigenous ways of healing has been, like, specifically for my family, has been super, super helpful. And we do it in the most modern ways, right? I follow a YouTuber, his name is the Feral Forager, and he is a Cherokee guy who is relearning a lot of foraging techniques, and there are all these different types of nuts that he forages, and then he tells people how to create different foods from the nuts. But he does this really cool deep dive into like the nutrients that are found in these different plants, and how it can be used like in a preventative way to stave off diseases and build up your immune system. And it's just such a powerful thing to be able to tell my dad, somebody's going to walk you through different plant materials, and then, to create, drinks and things like that. There's a drink called kanachi, and he just walks you through the whole process. And my dad, is just super proud of his Eastern band Cherokee heritage. And so I just send him the YouTube videos, and then it opens up a conversation for us to talk about what other things are we doing that are, on the preventative side to help us stay healthy. And so, it's just things like that happen within families, and we use a lot of modern technology in order to do that. So it's just great to hear you say that, Janelle, and like get that sense that the dialogue needs to be about, like, how do we do, holistic healthcare, and, what does that look like from different cultural perspectives, and what are sort of tangible pieces of knowledge that we can, find on, our journeys. And a lot of us, I'm just going to say, like, people of color from, very different cultures, because of colonization and because of racism, a lot of this knowledge has been erased. And so we have to, like, reclaim it. And the way that we tend to do it, is in, within our families, within our communities. And, sometimes we maybe utilize some unconventional ways of, like, reclaiming that knowledge. And so I just wanted to, give my quick spiel in terms of my own family experience, just to open that conversation about what that looks like sometimes. But there's just so many different ways that, people practice traditional healing methods, and they don't have to be completely separate from medical models. They can work in tandem with each other. And so I'm super excited to hear a little bit more from Dr. Hester on that, because I know that, like, he works in both of those spaces, the medical model and non-clinical models for healing. But I also realized that we're getting to a point where we should probably take a little bit of a break. So I want to take a quick 5-minute break. And during that time, if Dr. Melhauser if you can hold on to your thoughts for this question, because I wanted to make sure that you got a chance to answer this second question. So let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at about 3 p.m. Eastern, and we will continue where we left off. Awesome. We're coming back in. Whoa. That was my dog Eros. Okay, so we are continuing on with this question. In your experience, why is culturally affirming community care a health equity topic? And we have gotten to Dr. Melhauser.
Yeah, sure. So I really appreciate everything that Dave and Janelle shared. And I think that when I think about equity in terms of who gets to show up, there's like the part about if I don't feel safe, I'm going to avoid healthcare. And then there's like I might be able to physically, like, maybe I have insurance, maybe I'm even able to make a phone call and make an appointment. Maybe I even have a provider who means well, but I still might be shut out. So I still might not be believed. I might like show up and actually leave feeling worse than when I came in. And I think especially, for so many things that folks have already mentioned, like when people are forced to mask their communication or suppress their distress or just like navigate these broken systems that are embedded in all the isms that that penalize them for being dysregulated and penalize them for having disability that impacts their executive functioning in terms of like being able to keep appointments or make appointments or all the things. Like that's not care. That's control. So it's like, I don't know, when I think about health equity, it's not like who gets through the door. It's also about what happens, what's next, and who that system was built for. So I think the thing I'd add is that culturally affirming care is about shifting power, because in traditional healthcare, the provider sets the rules. The provider decides what counts as urgent. The provider decides how we communicate this. And it's not even the provider, it's the healthcare system, because the provider's getting thwarted too. The provider's getting, their access needs are not thwarted. They're not able to eat lunch. They're not able to drink water. They can go to the bathroom. Like they got to see a patient every 10 minutes. Like, I mean, the system is the villain, not the provider. So I think that's that, and the system is embedded in all with all the isms. So I think that when the dynamic where we have providers being thwarted, patients being thwarted, like an individual can have all the empathy in the world but still uphold a structure that keeps people out. Mm-hmm. So I think that like culturally affirming care means letting go of the idea that we as a professional know best. It's about building systems with the people, like we've been talking about, with the people that they're meant for. It means believing lived experience, not pathologizing lived experience. I appreciate when a system's like, oh, how can we include the people in the model? But I don't know, I just don't think that's good enough. I think it's like, can we just throw the whole model out? Can we change the model so it doesn't exclude people in the first place? And I think that has to happen at the level of the community, because I think that no amount of individual empathy can undo the harm of a system that was not designed for you. And I think as a community, and I think just like Janelle said, around the communities have been charting forth a course for themselves together with each other, since the dawn of time. And I think that's the key to the universe right there.
Yeah, I see. I love it. Yeah. Thanks, Mel. I can't emphasize enough that how much unity helps us, knowing that you have this group of people that will have your back kind of no matter what happens, no matter, if you are unemployed and you don't have, health insurance, that you can go to a local community center, and somebody says, I know Dr. Hinton doesn't have access to mental health care right now, but you know what, we have like a yoga class that's going on, and we know that like somatic healing is something that actually can help. And so, let me send a text or call and say, we're going to this community center together. And, is it replacing everything that, somebody needs in that moment? Maybe not, but there is that level of, I'm not, abandoned because I don't have the resources to get the care that I need at this time. And, I can't emphasize enough how much that is a reality for a lot of neurodivergent professionals. We're in this space where there's rolling layoffs, and folks are kind of like in transition a lot from one job to the next. And, maybe they have a little bit of period in between where they, still have a certain amount of benefits or something like that. There might be the possibility of being on unemployment or something like that for a short period of time. But like, we really live in a society where like, if you're not like working for a company, like it's very, very difficult to get access to care. And a lot of people were dependent on Medicaid for that reason. You know, that was kind of like what would come in the transition when you didn't have access to private healthcare. And so to lose that, and we have to be really, really honest that a lot of neurodivergent people are kind of at the center of losing access to care. Like, what do you do? And you have to have some kind of community that is going to step in and help you. And it's hard, honestly, for a lot of us to build that community because, you know, some of us struggle with forming trusting relationships. And there's a lot of variety of reasons for why that's the case. But we have to really kind of talk about that in terms of health equity as well, right? And I think for me in the last couple of years, having just consistency, you know, being able to go to a community clinic and go to, you know, a regular mindfulness group, and then meeting friends there and realizing that some of them had, you know, community centers and things like that where I could, you know, continue to go. And then just having, you know, like regular reminders. I know that somebody had just mentioned that, I think it was Dr. Hauser, that just getting in there, right? Just having a reminder to come in for your appointment is a really big deal, right? Or a reminder to meet up with a friend and get some non-clinical care, right? Is something that a lot of us have to really work at, right? It feels a little bit more manual than some neurotypical experiences. And so I just wanted to point that out as something as well to pay attention to. And I guess we can move on to the third question that we have. Which is, what do you feel is missing in the current healthcare structures for neurodivergent adults? I feel like I was starting to allude to that a little bit, but I'd love for you to take it away, Dave, and just, you know, add a little bit more of your experience and expertise to that question.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first, before I get started, I want to ask everyone who's watching, whichever platform you are, put 222 in the chat if you feel like you've been failed by your healthcare system at some point in your life. Put 222 in the chat if you feel like you maybe weren't heard or what your experience wasn't validated. I'm seeing some flow in, so it looks like this is a normal experience. People have that. So what I feel is missing, you know, when it comes to healthcare structure, is that whole person support. But then it's also, I guess, two layers. One of them is values. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Another one is a acronym to help people assess themselves that I created called Heat Check. I'll talk about that in a moment too. But first, when we're talking about structures in the healthcare system, what's really missing is this non-clinical, for at least my idea, is non-clinical mental health. And that means you're getting support, whether it be from a friend, from a group, from a community, which is preventative, versus, like we were talking about earlier, pathologizing people and putting them into boxes and medicating. I'm not against medication, but I see that we can avoid or even support and ease some of the challenges that people are experiencing, especially ACEs, if we can have a community support. Mark Donohue created Life Guides, one of the organizations I'm an executive at, and we provide peer-to-peer learning where people can learn from someone else who's been through a lived experience. And so we're utilizing and showing that there's immense value in someone sharing that, hey, I've been through what you've been through. I'm here to listen and learn from you. But to go back to the other two pieces that I was talking about, one of them is missing is a heat check. So heat check means help everyone assess themselves. And it works kind of in a cyclical function. It works for yourself because you're learning about yourself, but it also works so you can be a mirror for somebody else, meaning that it's quick and it's a simple way for you to assess, how am I feeling? That's the kind of help yourself. It's checking in with yourself. I feel like these structures don't have that. It's more so check the box, get this medication, or check this box, here's your diagnosis, and you're stuck in that diagnosis, which is one of the reasons why I'm always against oppositional defiance disorder, ODD. Whenever I see that, I'm like, no, there's got to be another way, because as soon as we put somebody on that track, they're on that track. And that is coming because we're not checking in with others. And so the E in heat check is help others check themselves too, which means, what's the hardest part of my day? What's taking up most of my energy? The A is assess, meaning know yourself deeply. Am I being fair? Am I judging too quickly? Am I stressed out right now? The T is for themselves, which is are my choices that I'm making, do they match up with what I want? Did I stick up for myself? And that means advocating for yourself too when it comes to healthcare structures. You have to advocate for yourself. No one else will, unless you have a good doctor, which if you do, hold on to them. There's not a lot of them. Joking, not joking. So the other piece is really understanding the value. I think understanding and accepting of different values in the structure is not there. And you have to understand there's different values. There's your values, your personal ones, what you think matters most. And there's your cultural values, what your family, school, community thinks is important. And all of these are helpful and really are needed so that you understand if they don't align. Like if you know that your values aren't aligning, you're going to end up upset, stressed, kind of frustrated. So I think values, heat check, and using and activating the global, intelligence that we have of lived experience is missing from that space.
Yeah, I do not see enough of lived experiences coming into clinical spaces. And I think that's the reason why maybe we're seeing such narrow definitions, when it comes to autism or ADHD, and a lot of women are mentioning like that their lived experiences aren't there, right? And so that's why they're being missed. And so I love to hear that, right? That there is self-advocacy, but some of that comes from seeing other people's lived experiences. And then that's kind of like where the light bulb kind of goes off for a lot of people. And they're like, oh, okay, that's me. Like I'm finally kind of starting to see myself, right? And so the more diverse voices we can get in medical spaces, the more access we're going to get, right, to lived experiences. Hopefully people feel safe enough, right, that they can actually bring their whole selves in as clinicians, right? And then hopefully it starts to broaden a bit more in terms of life experience, and then patients and folks will start to actually then see themselves, and then actually then be able to self-advocate and get the care that they need. Because I think the visibility is not always there. The representation is not always there. So I love that you brought that up. I'm gonna let Janelle go ahead and follow up. What do you feel is missing in the current healthcare structures for neurodivergent adults?
Oh, wow. First of all, Dave, let's talk about this heat. Come on. I'm here for that. Literal and figurative fire. I don't know. Anyway, so what I feel is missing, I think where I am most honed in on my perspective on this is leadership development. And I think I'm saying that for a lot of reasons, right? I'm the first Black president of the North Carolina Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. And I've been on boards for probably 15 years total. And so a lot of my consulting work is with boards and associations and the people that make policy, right? So the reason that I hone in on that is to say, I think that one of the things that is missing that matters is our presence at the right tables, the tables where these policies, these practices are being made. And it's not enough for just one of us to be sitting at that table. We need two or more of us sitting at all of these tables, all these decision-making areas. And so for me, I have found that there's a couple of places where we can make intervention to ensure that more neurodivergent folks are present at these tables. First is just our individual ability to advocate and to speak and to communicate across difference. And so I created a framework called the 3A multisystemic framework. And the base of that framework is AAA. And I say, if you're having problems communicating, remember AAA, right? So AAA is acknowledge, ask, act. It helps us to move through very specific steps of thinking about how we're communicating about power within power structures and to reform power structures, but also just communicating with a different culture, a different perspective, but with power in mind. So that's what AAA is about. If you want to learn more about it, you can check it out. I have a book chapter in a book called Anti-Blackness and the Stories of Authentic Allies. It's an Oxford University Press anthology about anti-racism. And so my chapter is the chapter about disability and neurodivergence in the book. And so I highlight that framework in my chapter. Then next is our family lives, like the way that we are empowering the leaders of households. And so how they're being supported and then how they're raising their children. And so at Bridges, we built Bridges on this framework called HOME, HOME, and it's actually a whole program. But I also offer it as a program, integrate it into our therapy, and provide like keynotes and speaking about it as well. But HOME stands for healthy order, open communication, management of family life, and educating children. And if we're able to support the leaders of households in knowing how to do all of these things, then they can support one another within their own family unit. And we already have a system of support. We already have a community of care that allows the people in that family, and including the children, to be pushed forward and supported as they're pursuing their growth, their development, pursuing leadership opportunities as they age. And that's the root of what helped me become who I am and how I am, is the strength that I gathered from my own family, who were really, really supportive, and pretty much the only people that I had to rely on as a military brat, right? So we honed in on like, hey, it's R4 and no more. Like, we got to lean on each other. We're moving every 2 or 3 years. We don't have this like solid support system that we get to build. It's just us. And you know what? That's enough. I'm evidence that that's enough. So that's where home training comes in. And then last is the phase that I'm at now, that I told y'all that I would tell you about, which is my research. So I've been a therapist for like 14 years. And what I continue to find after about year 5, year 6, I'm like, I'm hearing the same stuff, but I'm also hearing the same like resilience, the same grit that I am not teaching, right? I'm not teaching these folks how to be resilient. They're like in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're coming to sit down and talk to me. So obviously they're doing something right because they made it this far. And so what I discovered is we have a lot of things going for us all by ourselves without anybody telling us that we need to fix anything or we need to change anything or that something's wrong with you or any of that. We have a lot going for us all on our own, and we have the ability to improve, to grow, to develop, to advance change, to advocate. We have the ability to do that. We just need people to encourage us and maybe guide us a little bit, because that's what a good therapist does. You don't tell someone what to do. You just kind of guide them, just GPS. And people have the answers in there. And so when I decided to do my PhD, I decided to focus on, okay, what is the first nexus point that I want to focus on? And I wanted to focus on higher ed, because who makes the decisions that who makes the decisions that impact neurodivergent people most, that impact BIPOC neurodivergent people most? It's folks that are the leaders of education. It's folks that are the leaders of healthcare, folks that are the leaders of government. These are these systems that we have to interact with, whether we want to or not. We got to send our kids to school for so many years. We got to go to work. We got to get insurance. Like there's these things, these systems that are impacting our well-being. And in order for us to develop leaders that get to sit at those tables that make decisions for those systems, those people have to get through college. And not just any college. A lot of times, if they want to be the decision makers, they need to be able to get through kind of difficult university settings. They need to be able to get through R1s and R2s, these places that are going to position them to write more papers and do more research and get more positions. And so that's the focus of my research. My research study is called the NEXT study. It's Neurodivergent Experiences Transformed. And I'm focused on better understanding how we can bridge the expertise of Black and Brown neurodivergent people, all neurodivergent people, which is the focus on Black and Brown neurodivergent people, and that expertise and leaders in higher ed, particularly at R1s. And I want to focus on how can we shift institutional policy and practice change. A lot can change at just one institution. If you have one institution that is like doing amazing work with neurodivergent folks, you can go 30 minutes down the street to a different university and they're having like the absolute worst time supporting neurodivergent people. So that's not a policy issue on a state level or on a federal level. That's an institutional level policy and practice change that needs to happen. And so that's the focus of my research there is how do we build community, next community that can influence these nexus points? And I'm just starting with higher ed, but I'm interested in influencing change at these different nexus points that impact BIPOC neurodivergent people.
I love that, especially from a leadership perspective, and just bringing it back to kind of what you were talking about with a lot of your clients, that they must be doing some things right. You know, they must have created some structure for themselves in order to get to this point where they're even, you know, holding down a job and able to speak to you. And so, yeah, it's like tapping into those funds of knowledge that we have, that really like, and then being, you know, examples for younger people who are, you know, like just thinking about, you know, the prospect of becoming a leader in their community. You know, they need some role models, some folks to look to. And so I think that's a really great study, and I'm excited to help you with it and see how, you can create a foundation for other scholars doing similar work in the future. So thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and it's super exciting. I wanted to let Dr. Mel Hauser answer that third question on what's missing in our current healthcare structures for neurodivergent adults.
Sure. So, I mean, I think healthcare isn't just missing pieces. It's like the whole system and its foundations have a really like a series of embedded myths and fallacies. All the isms, and including that there's one right way to think, communicate, move through the world. And so when you don't match that mold, either you're seen as the problem or you're not seen at all. Either because you're not there physically, or you are there, but you're not understood and you are just dismissed and invalidated. So I just think that there's no universal design that is offering everything you do in multiple different ways. That's what's missing in healthcare. It's the idea of scaffolding for people who their brains don't work in the ways that the healthcare system caters to. The defaults, you must pick up the phone to make an appointment. You must fill out the 20-page packet to become a new patient. You must fit into the, 10-minute container. And if you can't, there's going to be a narrative, a judgment about you. So there's no infrastructure that recognizes that, or actually also that recognizes what our patients deeply know about ourselves, which is that like most neurodivergent people are dealing with all the things, the dysautonomia, the hypermobility, the mast cell, the chronic fatigue, like all this stuff. It's all happening. It's all interacting. It's all connected to each other. It's not siloed. Like the body parts are not silos. And so a lot of neurodivergent people have had the experience of going provider to provider, system to system, like chasing scraps of partial care that never really connect. So I think the recognition that there's like a deep wisdom and like a deep knowing that people have about themselves that is also missing from the healthcare system.
Yeah. And when I was talking about funds of knowledge just recently, following up on some of Janelle's comments, I feel like that's what a lot of that is. It's a sort of a deep wisdom of understanding how your body works and what structures allow you to thrive. It's really amazing how many late diagnosed people I speak with, and they know how to regulate their nervous system. They figured it out when they were children, but they didn't really have the terminology for it. They didn't really have a way to explain it to other people for why they were doing certain behaviors, but they just knew that it made them calm and it allowed them to focus or, get things done, live a happier existence. So I think like there's a lot of things that are maybe intuitive that didn't really need to be told to us from experts, and that should be validated, right? And that's why I think having some sort of equal dialogue back and forth is probably what I would say is missing, because I think a lot of neurodivergent people want to help other people that are like them. And they just may not have that space in our current model. But I see it, in other countries. I had posted a video very recently about stimming and mindfulness practices and how they're actually very much the same, right? Like there's a lot of crossover there, and a lot of neurodivergent people just haven't had the language to say that, and people look at you differently if you're saying I'm doing mindfulness activities versus I'm stimming, right? And so I think even just the framing of what people do, what kinds of structures they create in order for them to thrive, even that, you know, and a lot of folks have said, you know, we need better PR because, you know, if you don't frame something in a way that people from outside of your community will understand, then that's where a lot of times it gets invalidated, right? Or devalued in some way. And so I don't know, I'm not someone with a strong marketing background. I haven't worked in public relations at all, but I do think that the more that we unite with different people, with different knowledge sets and wisdom, the more we are able to advocate for ourselves and our community members through different epistemological frameworks, right? And so I think that is maybe something that's missing and that we could talk about a little bit more. I know we are over time. This happens to us frequently. So I wanted to make sure that we had some time, if there are any comments or questions from our audience that we can cover really quickly before we go. But we are at our time. So I'm going to check in with AJ really quick. Did we have any questions that came up as we were speaking?
Well, as the questions are coming in, I do want to, of course, show my appreciation and gratitude for this conversation. I'm hearing so much of what I've been kind of thinking about, but then also haven't been thinking about. For example, the leadership, like what's important for leaders to practice and understand, and the idea, Mel, the way you said, kind of like, well, maybe the system just needs to be thrown out. I haven't really given too much thought to why are we patching a system that maybe just needs to be completely changed. But here's a question that maybe we can talk about if there's no other questions coming in, is how do we change the culture around it? Because or culture and maybe the consciousness, that's maybe a better term. How do we change the consciousness around neurodivergent? Because right now it's very much so, you're neurodivergent if you're stimming or if you have challenging behaviors like physical aggression, you're a problem. That's kind of the consciousness, I feel. How do we shift that to large swath of people?
Yeah, it looks like Mel's got something to add.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Dave's prompt. I think that it starts with like shifting our own narratives through community connection. So like if you think about yourself as a flawed human being, like, because that's what society's telling you for like all of the aspects of your identity. But like that travels with you everywhere you go, regardless of how anyone else is viewing you. But I think that when you have a community, when you can show up, when you feel seen and heard and believed, and that, that becomes your new norm. And so that you can discern safe from not safe. If you've never felt safe anywhere you go, like that's how life is. But then when you shift that, you're like, oh, and I think it's about like just really shifting like what we can demand and expect from our environments. And so that when you go to a healthcare practice, if you've never had a good healthcare experience, you're like, healthcare, that's what they do. They invalidate and gaslight me. But if I've had a good experience, a community-driven, collective, affirming experience, then you go somewhere else. You're like, oh, I'm going to walk out of that place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? That like our life experiences really frame like our perspectives on like what we're getting into and sort of like how we should advocate for ourselves. And like, so I kind of feel like taking a step back and being like, hey, you know, like maybe this particular clinic just doesn't align with what I'm looking for, or this particular specialist is just like not meshing with my life experience. And so like I gotta keep going until I get to, you know, a model that does align with me and my life experience. It's almost like that's the kind of self-advocacy that we have to go for these days. We can't, you know, assume that we're gonna walk in and folks are gonna like understand like our perspectives. And I think like we're at a point where it still is pretty difficult in terms of access, because it depends on what state you're in, right? Like whether you're going to be able to find a therapist that's neuroaffirming, right? Like you just might not even have that person available in your state, right? So like we're still kind of dealing with that, but then there's also this sort of next level of like, what are the alternatives that are available in your local community? And so, you know, it would be great if we could just like create some databases, right, where folks can like just kind of go and quickly do a search and find providers that are, you know, aligned with their cultural values, their life experience, find folks that are like them, that are most likely not going to gaslight them very much. And so I think like that's sort of at the spot where we are. But if we could change the power dynamic a little bit, I do think it would make a huge difference in terms of building trusting relationships. I definitely think that just like in any other space, like that's what people are kind of yearning for. And sometimes it's just that's the missing piece. Like it's that simple. I've definitely been in environments where I feel like folks are giving me the tools to self-advocate that, you know, are medical providers, right? Like I've definitely been in those spaces. So they exist, right? And we just kind of need to see more of that for neurodivergent people. You know, just kind of that humanistic walking folks through step by step to make sure that they access the care that they need.
Can I hop in there really quickly?
Yeah.
I just wanted to drop a few resources because of what you just said. For therapy, if you are looking for a neurodivergent therapist, there is a website you can look at. It's neurodivergent therapist directory. So indtherapist.com. I think the creator of that grassroots organization was Amanda, if I'm not mistaken. I think her name is Amanda. It's a great place where you can find neurodivergent therapists. A lot of people don't know there are a lot of neurodivergent therapists. So if you are looking for one, you can probably find one on indtherapist.com. For like SLPs and folks like that, there's the Neurodiversity Collective, therapistndc.org. And that has like different kinds of therapists, not just mental health clinicians, but other folks that provide other kinds of care, but they are all committed to neurodiversity affirming care.
Okay.
But yeah, if you type in neurodiversity affirming, there's a nice little movement going on in the mental health world to push for neurodiversity affirming care. So it's not as bad as it used to be.
Yeah. Can you say that last one more time? So I can put it in the chat.
It's the Therapist Neurodiversity Collective as therapistndc.org.
Oops. I might have gotten that. I did Therapist Neurodiversity Collective.
Amelia, you're right, Jessica. Amelia. I was like, I
Amelia.
know it starts with an A, but I can't remember her name right now. It's Amelia.
Did I get that right in the chat? Therapistneurodiversitycollective.com. Is that correct?
It's therapistndc.org.
Therapist.
I think somebody typed it earlier. Did I just see it?
Yep, it's in the chat.
ndtherapist.com. Okay.
.org.
All right. Thanks, AJ. Thanks for clarifying that. I'll delete this one.
Look at that. The community supporting.
I know.
Community does.
Thanks so much, AJ. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got that right for folks.
But yeah, I strongly encourage folks to get a neurodiversity affirming therapist for that person that is going to help you navigate all the stuff that we're talking about. I do this for my clients all the time. They're thinking through like they need to get, do they need to get accommodations? Well, I can help them navigate that process. They're trying to decide, do they need to get a specific type of assessment or not? There's a lot of people who think that they need to pay $5,000 for an assessment. But do you really? Like, what kind of accommodations do you need? If you don't need accommodations, why are you going through all that? Just go to a regular therapist and get a basic assessment and see if your therapist is gonna provide a diagnosis or not. Talk with your therapist about writing down your diagnosis, and whether it should be written or not. There's all kinds of things that a neurodiversity affirming therapist will be able to help you navigate, because they do the work all the time with their clients, but also they are neurodivergent themselves, so they know the processes.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. And is it like delineated by state so that you?
I know that ND therapist is delineated by state.
Awesome, that's good to know. Yeah, because sometimes if you don't have some sort of directory that you can kind of just go to, it is very difficult. It's like a needle in a haystack sometimes. And so it is nice to know that those resources exist. And definitely for folks who are late realized and don't really know what their options are, it's nice to be able to tap into those resources. So thank you so much for letting us know about that. And
no problem. Hit me up if you're in North Carolina. If you're looking for education everywhere, but if you're in North Carolina and you're looking for specifically therapy, I can help you out there too.
Thanks so much, Janelle. So I think we're sort of at the end of our time. I love the extra questions and all the side quests that we had. That's one of the things I absolutely love about these panels. And so I guess we're probably ready to wrap up. If none of the speakers have any other questions or comments. And it was just awesome to get this deep dive today, because we need more of it, and we have more panels to come. And so it's just so awesome to be here with all of you.
Thanks for having me. Encourage everybody to be nice to yourself today, because others may not.
Always stressing that self-compassion, which is awesome, and self-love, self-compassion, respect. All of those things should come first. And we're just, happy to be able to share as much support and resources as possible. Any other comments before we go?
Just to add to that, we're not alone. We're in it together. I was going to maybe have a follow-up thing, but then brain is done with thought.
Yeah.
Brain does that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been amazing. I am totally humbled. I feel like I learned so many new things today, and I'm looking forward to staying in contact with all of our speakers, and hopefully in the future, they'll come back to do more panels, or possibly just one-off talks to go into more detail on specific topics in their area of focus. So I guess with that, I am going to sign off for this particular panel, but please see us next month. And we're going to be focused on workplace advocacy and care for neurodivergent adults. And so that's going to be a whole other oyster to break into. So super excited. If you've loved this talk, please follow back up with us next month for our next health equity panel. Thank you so much to all the speakers.
Thank you for joining us for this important conversation. The insights shared today are just the beginning of the work we need to do together. Ready to be part of the change? Join our community of advocates, professionals, and allies working to create a world where every neurodivergent person can thrive. Visit our website to learn about upcoming panels, access resources, and connect with our community. Your support makes this work possible. When you donate to Umbrella ND, you're investing in health equity, supporting vital research, and helping us amplify neurodivergent voices. No contribution is too small. Every dollar helps us build a more inclusive future. Together, we're building health equity one conversation at a time. Until next time, keep advocating, keep learning, and keep thriving. Visit umbrellaopensdoors.org to donate and stay connected. Thank you.